Hi, everybody. It's Robbie. Back again this week for Miscellaneous Candor. Frank, honest, and otherwise outspoken. This week, Stephen and I have some pretty interesting conversations. Talk a little bit about happiness and what the research shows about the 5 things you need to do to actually be quote unquote happy. Sometimes that's important and sometimes it's not. Sometimes you just have to live through life. Anyway, that's just my opinion. Okay. We also too talk a little bit about the issue with men in the world, in the United States, in society. So we have a big long conversation about that. And Stephen did listen to a podcast. Surprise, surprise. And also too, Stephen has some pretty interesting conversation this week about robots and AI and some, I don't know, particular activities. Let's just call it that. All right, well, kick back, listen, and here we go. Welcome, everybody. We're back. It's Robbie. And here we are, another week at Miscellaneous Candor. Frank, honest, and otherwise outspoken. Hi, Stephen.
Hello, Robbie. Hello, my friends. It's I, Stephen Kennedy, your board-certified atheist at your service. And Robbie's service, if she ever wants to talk about God or the non-existence of God, I am here. I'm your guy.
Okay, so podcast. Let's see how I did that. You know I pray for you every day. I should probably put that out there.
Don't do that. Don't pray for me.
I do for your soul. I pray your soul. I do.
Oh my God.
So just know that those are good. You can interpret
I,
it as
you
good
know what?
energy and
I
positive
appreciate
light.
any well wishes and prayers from me. I do.
That's okay.
It's out of kindness and love. So I do.
Yes, it is.
I do really appreciate it.
Yes, it is. Okay, so all right. So I told you, I was going to start listening to kind of the top. Oh, I don't know if I did tell the audience. So I'm looking at the top podcasts. Um, I'll look at different platforms, but right now I am looking at some of the top rated podcasts, and one of them is Mel Robbins. I think I spoke about her. She
No.
had a really good podcast that I listened to recently, and it was on. Let me just go here and see. Was the one that I listened to that I liked? Oh, how to create the life you want. So there's a woman who does happiness research, which I thought was interesting, and she has like a whole lab,
Oh.
and she talks about how she's talking about how to create the life that you want. And so she talks about the 5 V's. I forgot them all, but one of them is like venting. Then the other one is like, what are your values? The other one is like, expressing your voice, having vision. And then there was another one. I can't remember the other V. But the point is that when they were talking about this on this podcast, essentially Mel came to the point as she realized that a lot of times when people are in a bad place, right, they're talking about all of the things that you can do. Like the self-help things are, this is what you can do to the first V is validate. That's what it was. Validate. So validate, vent, voice. No, validate, vent, values, voice, and vision. Okay. So she realized that all of that, you should do this, you should do that, like go for a walk, go do this, all of those things that are supposed to help. And some people are like, F that, I don't want to do that, I'm tired, I don't feel good, I want to eat, whatever, I want to sleep, I don't want to be bothered. But these 5 different things to make you happy essentially are things to get you to the point where you can do all of those things that people suggest. Like it's dealing with the undercurrent of why you're feeling how you're feeling. And I'd never thought about it that way. Like I never thought about the whole oops, my microphone fell. You probably heard that. I never thought about it that way. The validate thing is a good one for particularly for people, and sometimes I suffer from this. And I know people will be like, "No, you don't," but sometimes I do. People pleasing, right? Like if you are a person who sometimes you're like, "Oh no, uh, you're annoyed by something, but you do it anyway. You know, "Oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. Like everything's fine."
Hmm.
You should tell yourself, "No, you're not fine." Like, do
But
you
man,
speak it out loud to yourself in the but it's like, "No, I'm not fine. I don't like how this is going right now. Um, Let me take a minute before I decide what I really wanna do." Like, literally stop yourself and validate to yourself how you're feeling, and that just letting that out, evidently, this research found, even if it sounds corny as F, the act of doing it actually does help you. Which I thought was kinda crazy, but true. The same thing for venting. Okay, what were you gonna say?
well, I was gonna say, when I if someone asks me to do something and I really don't want to do it, I say fine. I say fine. I'm fine. It's fine. I say it in a very begrudgingly manner, in a very angry manner, so it's very clear to the person that I'm not fine with it, but I'm doing it just for them. Is that good enough or no?
Well, no, because doing that, you're still going against your
So
inside
basically,
feeling.
you're
But
saying you should just say "fuck off." I'm not doing it. Is that what you're
no,
telling me?
no, no.
No
You need to
compromise.
validate no, no, you need to validate in yourself, like, to yourself, whether you are talking to yourself in your head or you're, like, in a place where you're not around that person and you validate that for
Mm,
yourself. The act of getting that out is good for you, good for us as human beings.
I see.
It's
Okay,
good to actually state your true feelings to yourself.
got
Like,
it.
don't
Okay.
ignore it, and I think women suffer from this more than men do. For a variety of
I
reasons.
would agree because men are much more relaxed mentally, much more open-minded.
Okay, I'm not going
No,
down
yeah,
that
no,
path because
you don't
that was
agree?
just like
Come on. I mean,
no, I mean,
women.
like, that was so, like, low-key insulting.
No, not
Men
at
are
all. I'm saying
naturally
no,
calm-minded and
no.
open.
We are.
Really?
We're more collected. We're just more
Oh
relaxed.
my god, yeah, because
We
women are
take
so
things.
crazy emotionally.
We
Okay. Like, no,
I did
I'm
not say that. I did
no, you
not
didn't
say that.
say it, but it was implied, and that's not what
No, no, I
I
would
mean.
never. Robbie, Robbie,
Really?
come
Are
on
we
now.
really going with the Robbie with that tone?
I That's not what I meant. I meant men and women are completely different animals, right? We're different. We're very different. Our minds are built differently. That's what I'm saying. And women react to different stimuli in different situations in a much better manner than men do, right? We all have our positives and negatives because we're animals in the end. Hello?
All I'm saying
Is
is
the mic
that
on?
I think that because sometimes, like, and I can say this as a mom, and then you're like balancing being a mom, and then you're working and you're doing this, and these are not excuses. These are just like, what is the reality on the ground, right? You're trying to do all these things for your husband, etc. All of those things sometimes there are situations when a lot of times you do compromise. You do quote unquote push through. She talked about the fact that the idea of always having to push through and doing that because you're trying to strive for a goal, pushing through means that you're not validating how you're feeling. You're just ignoring it and going past it. And there are a
Hmm.
lot of different circumstances where women do that for whatever reason. And men are taught to state many times, like, even if they don't state how they're feeling, they're meant to like be like, no, like to take a strong stance on something, right?
Hmm.
That's not always, women are not rewarded for that. If they do, then they're called a bitch or aggressive or out of line. Now, she's talking about pushing through. So you know that if you want to get to a certain goal, there's certain things that you're going to have to compromise about. But how does that really make you feel? And it
Yeah,
sounds really corny and quirky and like weak to an even degree. But the idea is that if you are having issues and you do want to kind of like have a better feeling of being quote unquote happy, so to speak, validating how you feel, even if you think it's corny, the research shows that it does allow you to better move forward because you're acknowledging it. Glossing over and being in denial is not helping you physically or mentally.
makes sense. That
And
makes
many people feel like it does because it's just push through, forget it, kind of let it go. You can't.
yeah.
And so that's one of the things about the validate part. And then there's the whole other ones, right? And how do you get to that point?
And I
And
guess these are the kinds of things that lead to divorce too, right? It's just keep on taking it and pretending the problems don't exist, or you're comfortable with
yeah,
everything. But
to a degree, they didn't talk about that per se in this. They might have, but I wasn't really listening to that part if they did. But that you do make a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Hmm. So I thought that podcast was interesting. Then I listened to, because, well, me and I like Scott Galloway, but I
you
listened
do?
to,
I didn't even notice.
I know. But I listened to Theo Vaughn's podcast. Do you know who he is?
Oh, you did? What?
Yes, I
How
do.
is this even possible?
I said every week I'm going to listen to a different podcast that is top rated that, people might not think I would listen to. I listen to Theo Vaughn, and yes, he is a right wing podcaster. I know Donald Trump was on his podcast.
I feel like he's, so he mingles with some of the podcasters that I actually really like, but specifically about Theo Von, I think he's kind of a degenerate. So I don't really listen to his stuff, but when he participates in podcasts with the people that I like,
Hmm.
it makes a funny combination. But on his own, yeah, I'm not a fan.
Well, here's the thing about you not being a fan. His podcast, at least in the charts that I was looking at, is rated 30 for 31 out of, like, there are millions of podcasts rated 31. Um, he speaks to men.
Why is his podcast rated 31? That's
I'm gonna
disturbing.
tell you. I'm gonna tell you why. And
Okay.
this is the thing about, our show and also too, just in general of this whole podcast review that I think it's important. Like there's so many people who are listening to podcasts, but not everybody listens to everything. You can't, right? It's impossible.
Yeah.
So I figure I could kind of break it down and start listening to certain ones. And but I listened to this and I listened to one where it's a guest who I like, right? So it was easier for me to take it in. But
Mhm.
listening to what he says, one, he was talking about how he feels as a man because Scott Galloway has a big thing about men right now. He's writing a book on it. He's talking about how important it is for us to regenerate and support boys and men in society. And I agree with that because I do think that there's been a little bit of a rotation um, in terms of dismissing men and always saying that masculinity is toxic and all of these things that while they do exist, not everyone is like that. And when people who are trying to figure out where they fall in that hear that, and it seems like that's the only message, then they can become toxic. So they talked about how one, the majority of suicides that happen, um, I don't know, something ridiculous, like 80% of the people that are committing suicide are men.
Wow.
Yeah,
Really?
it's something ridiculous like that. It's something ridiculous. It's between 60 and 80 or something. It's a high amount.
That's wild. That's wild.
It's a high amount.
It's funny. I
And
would have
then
thought it would be the opposite because women are persecuted in this society as opposed to men, and
exactly.
men are celebrated. So I thought it would have been the
Exactly.
opposite.
Well, that's the whole thing. The idea, that men are celebrated. Men are still running a whole lot of things. Men, like, let's not get it wrong. But at the same time, there are the college enrollment has it reversed, and then like graduate school and all of that stuff is like it's a ridiculous amount. There are more women in graduate school, like way above 60-70% than men. The
Really?
college enrollment perspective of men are now it's 60-40 for the most part. Some in some schools it's 70-30, 80-20. And what I mean by that is women. 80
Women to
women.
men. Okay.
Yes, women to men, 60
Wow,
40.
that's wild.
Yes, 70-30 certain schools, women to men. Yes, yes, yes.
Why is this happening? Do you
Oh,
get have any insight into
this,
this?
well, he talked about it on this podcast, and just how men right now, and this is with the middle class and everything, there's not a lot of role models of men who are. Scott says what he does for his sons is he tells them, go out and just talk to a stranger. Like, you can't come home until you've talked to someone, to get
Mhm,
them to interact with someone, right?
mhm.
Theo Vaughn was saying that, it's weird. Like, I saw a woman I liked that was in Whole Foods in New York City. And I went up to her and I was like, is that spaghetti? And she kind of looked at him because it was something else. And so then he felt weird. And so he kind of walked away. And there's this whole thing
Well,
now
Theo
of,
Von was just trying to hit on her, that's all it was.
yes, he was, but
He he had a stupid
but
way of doing it.
but the point is that, and this is what Scott said, if he can feel that way as somebody who's Theo Vaughn, and he has this top podcast, he has this money, has this woman probably didn't know who he was, right? If he can feel like that, imagine what a young boy is feeling like, who is in his mom's basement, or hasn't really gone out, is not in sports,
Playing
because
on his
that's
phone
one of
all
the,
day long.
yeah, playing on his phone all day long. Before, people used to go outside and they used to play. We didn't have
Yeah.
these phones, you didn't have Instagram. But that's the other thing, they're just talking about how men get caught online and they're just talking, and then they get into these, the studies have shown they get into this doom spiral where if they don't actually interact with women and they don't have some positive sort of interaction with women, then they get into the point of feeling misogynistic and sometimes even violent towards women. And Theo said, I know because I talked to some of those guys in these chat rooms. So I would not have known any of this if I didn't listen to his podcast. If I turned my mind off and I said, F it, I think he's a degenerate, like you said, I think he's this and that, I'm not gonna listen. And the thing about it that I did find is, no, him and Scott don't necessarily agree with each other. Because he's
Mhm.
hardcore Trump, right?
Yeah.
He's hardcore on certain things. But he did say this. He said, at some point, I was a Democrat. I don't know if he's telling the truth. I'm going to
Theo
assume that he
Von was a
is.
Democrat?
He said at one point, he said he was a Bernie guy. He said he
Okay.
was a Bernie guy. And
That's
he said
interesting.
that he felt like some of these things just went way too far on the other side. And so he said that, the other thing too that I thought was so interesting, Scott was saying, men need to be able to go out and help other men, like boys, like, if because there's so many single parent households, and not single fathers, single moms,
Mhm,
across ethnicities,
mhm.
in Appalachian Mountains, in West Virginia, someplace in deep North Carolina. No, but seriously, like, but really, deep someplace in Ohio and Montana or whatever, there are a lot of single moms. So
Yeah,
how
yeah,
can these single moms have male figures in their kids' life? They're not necessarily. He said that there's all these signups to help young girls for these all these nonprofit organizations. There's not the same for men, because now it's like,
and
if you're
then we
out
end up with
there.
people like JD
Yes.
Vance.
Well, I don't. Okay, I'm not going there, but
Alright,
because we're not talking about that this week.
right.
But my point is that we don't open up. His point is that we don't open up the possibility of men being role models to young boys anymore because of all of the stuff that's happened in the past, like the stuff with the Pope and the
Mhm.
stuff with the athletes. Like there's always the one bad apple always messes it up for everybody else. But we've got to rotate back to that because there's all these boys who are looking for role models and then they're going too far. And that was the whole thing. Scott's like, you can't have, you know, somebody who's basically acting super feminine and saying that's masculinity. And then on the
Yeah.
other side saying, okay, let's just blow up everybody and nobody matters. That's it. Where's the middle ground? That
Yeah.
doesn't exist anymore. And that's where we need to get to. And that's his goal. And he feels like um there's you talk to moms and they say, my daughter is at NYU getting a degree in business. My other daughter is in graduate school, and my son is in the basement playing video games, and he doesn't know what to do.
Hmm.
So this concept, and we talked about this when we had Vert on our podcast. We talked a little about this, but they had a serious conversation. Scott was talking about we need to bring back mandatory service. Theo Vaughn said, what does that mean? He was telling Theo Vaughn and his listeners what mandatory service is. How, like, you finish high school and then 2 years you either go into the armed services, you help older people, you go and you do volunteer for something, and then you have like some stake in the country that you live in. You know that you're contributing and you get paid for that. Like that used to be something that people did,
But
right?
do you feel like parents these days are a little too hands off and not providing the guidance that is
It's
critical to
all of
development?
it, but it's all of it. It's all of it, yes, and that's the other thing. The idea too of these huge, like, goals, right? Like the of, okay, so he talks about who wants more men who are actually healthy, providing, successful in life? Women. Women want good men out there.
Mhm.
And now, with online dating, they talked about how, like, the percentages of how many men get swiped over versus women, if they're not a certain height, if they don't look a certain way. All of these, because of the goals and all of these artificial ideas of what you're supposed to have based on social media.
Mhm.
Because before social media and before all of these, everybody looked like what we talked about last week, um, in terms of the family, um, people kind of knew in their society or in their environment, okay, well, this is the person who I'm attracted to, blah, 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 blah. But they didn't
Mhm.
feel unconfident about themselves. They didn't feel like, oh, I'm going to get better. Because now we're in a state where those 30% or those 20% or those 40% of men that are going to school or graduate school or et cetera,
Mhm.
there's so few of them. And there's all these women. And then even if all these women are going after the same men, and
Mhm.
so that provides this whole, like, this new dynamic I was listening to. It's called what? Ethical non-monogamy, where,
Right, we talked
we
about
we
this.
talked about that, right? So then there's that piece that I didn't even make the connection until this conversation. But we need to help build up our boys so that they don't feel bad for being boys.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know that I'm going to get a lot of pushback from that. There's going to be some people that are like, oh, you're so, right leaning, or why would you say that? You're against girls. That's totally.
No, I'm
And,
not getting that. I'm not.
but we do need to, and this is not saying, okay, people think, and this is the other part they make very clear, and I'm going to say it too. Just because we're saying we need to spend more time with boys doesn't mean that means that it erases everything that is happening and we continue to do for girls.
Of
That's
course,
not
of
what
course.
people are, but there is an undercurrent that even Theo brought it up too. Well, does that mean that, just forget, now we're going to step on? No, it does not. Like, we don't have to. But people aren't saying these things. People are making all these assumptions based on how they're feeling and based on where they're sitting in
Mm.
society. But so fascinating. Anyway, I really liked the show. It was almost 2 hours long, so it took me a little while to get through it. He is definitely down home Southern. he has that accent. If
Oh
you
no.
are
He's got
someone
the
in,
mullet, and it's 2025. Um,
that's who he is.
yeah.
That's who he is. I'm not going to push back on him on that. That's who he is. That's how he rolls. That's fine. But we got to get past that type of thing in terms of if we want people to start respecting each other and if we want to start raising the level of our boys. And it does not have to come at the detriment of our women. And I just think this is so important. Okay, we're at 24. I talked a lot. Whew.
Yeah, I'm thinking about, and I'm thinking about how from what I see is that a lot of times children are not children are not given the guidance that they deserve, even if both of their parents are present. It's
Mhm.
more of a hands-off approach, and uh, for a developing child, it's not necessarily the best way to go. I mean, growing up, if I didn't have my father guiding me and holding my hand through the whole process and being there for me every single time I needed him to be there, if I didn't have that, I don't know what I would be today. I am who I am today because my father was there to guide me and teach me about what it is to be a good human being every step of the way. Um, so, and I see that that's not exactly the way things are these days. It's a different approach.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I'll say this too. Um my dad passed away mid 2000s. I don't think I've ever shared the year on here. If I did, then okay, but I'm not going to say it again. But essentially, um I think about like we had a good relationship. He was in the home, all of that, but then sometimes too it would be tough, right? As I grew up,
Hmm.
but he was my dad and I had my dad.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
I
had
can't
my
imagine
dad.
what it is for these kids that don't have that male figure in the house. I mean,
And
what
I
I can't imagine what it must be like.
I mean, it's totally different, which is why they need it if they don't have it in the house. And it doesn't even need to be like I would say too, like if you have a male figure in your home when you're growing up and you see that, because some people don't want to get married. Like that's not the ideal for everybody. But you see that and people are like, well, okay, um, I can do this on my own. But you still need to bring people in your life. And Scott talked about that. Scott was raised by a single mom. He said, but his
Mm,
mother was very good at bringing strong male figures in his life. In fact,
mm,
there's some that he still keeps in touch with, even if even like ex-boyfriends that she had, that
hmm.
he still keeps in touch with.
Wow.
That helped him. Yes, so this whole thing, but the whole when toxic masculinity became a thing, I remember thinking in my mind, I never said it out loud, but I remember thinking in my mind, this is going to be bad for boys. Like, this is going to be bad. Like, I get what they were saying by toxic masculinity, but when you start throwing that out all the time and you start saying that, you're basically saying that anything that's masculine, anything that's male formed is toxic. It's like the worst of the worst. So, what are you telling boys who don't understand all of the context and history
Yeah.
and everything around it that comes into those two words? Because you don't explain that when you just throw it out there. You don't
Yeah.
explain the context. You don't explain the history. You don't explain why you're coming to that. You just say it and you just keep saying it and you just keep hitting it and keep hitting it. How is someone supposed to feel who's male? They can't feel good.
Yeah.
Even the
Yeah.
ones that do understand the history. At a certain point, it hits. You start, am I toxic? Am I this? And that's what he said. He said, Theo Vaughn said, sometimes there's certain places where I'll go in certain parts of the country, like in New York or whatever, and I feel like, do, well, this is what he said. Do I have to leave my dick at the door? Do I have to do this? Like he said it, it was pretty droll, but he was making a point about like there's certain places where if you go in there and you even show that you have a little bit of masculinity, you're going to be shit posted, shitted on, get out, that sort of thing. So if men are feeling like that, If he's feeling like that, then of course all these other people are feeling like that too. So you got to get to a place where we are better to our young boys and we don't totally dismantle who they are. And another thing about sports, which I totally agree, when you do play sports, it's not about the winning, it's about learning how to lose.
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
there's a lot of that too. You're so special, you're so perfect, everything's going to be perfect for you, nothing's going to happen. So when something does happen, the person like blows up and they can't recover.
Yeah, I have a lot of valuable experience losing at sports. I have one sports trophy from when I was a child playing tennis. You know, I'm Indian, so of course we play
Mhm.
tennis. You know, that's a thing. We and
And
we
cricket.
naturally excel at tennis. So
Mhm.
I have one.
And cricket, right? And cricket.
Well, Indian Americans don't play so much cricket. It's more Indians from India that'll play cricket.
Oh, okay, okay, all right.
Yeah. So I have my one trophy, my one
Mhm,
tennis trophy, and
mhm.
I hold on to that thing with dear life. Let me tell you, I I have two nephews, and I tell all sorts of wild stories how I was this tennis star, and I tout my trophy. Um, but my sister was actually a big athlete. She was a big track and cross country star. So um, all of the different schools, she was well known in the community for her running skills, and she had all sorts of trophies and medals. And often I lie to people and tell when they come and see all the trophies and the medals, I lie to people and say that they're mine. Um, but yeah, it's sometimes I get away with it. But when they look a little closely at the medals and they see that there's a female on the depicted on the medals, I don't get away with it. Yeah, so I have my one medal, but to your point, that
Mhm,
was I was sidetracked a little. But yeah, you got to learn how to lose and be okay with it, and use it as a learning a lesson, right?
mhm.
um, how to go about it next time and how to handle loss. You know, don't be. How do you handle it? How do you perceive it? How do you use it to train your brain and to help yourself excel in the future?
Yes. Yes. And they talked about that too. And that's really important for men to do that so they don't go off the edge, so they don't spiral, so they don't get depressed, so they don't, you know, have suicides, so they don't commit suicide, so they don't also to take it out on women, become violent
Yeah,
or the society, right?
and
Because a lot of that comes from feeling like you have no hope or you're failing and then you can't do anything about it. But they can, and that's his whole thing of coming back to a place where we allow and boys to be solid, productive, successful participants in society and that being an okay thing and not being toxic.
yeah, agreed.
So
We
I
need
thought that was interesting. And yes, I got that from listening to Theo Vaughn. So
I was just going to say that I am fascinated by the fact that you have been talking about Theo Von for the last 20 minutes. That's interesting. Wow, I would not have expected that of you.
I wouldn't have either, but there I was. Now,
Huh.
I said I only listened to one. I did listen to the one where Scott was on it, right? So of course I'm going to like that episode. I
Yeah.
haven't gone there and listened to ones with other people who might
Well, yeah, I listened to some of his other stuff, and you might not be as compelled to continue listening.
Yes, I agree with that because I found that he was asking Scott a lot of questions to get his answers, and he was really trying to learn because obviously he's a professor, so he was learning from him, but it wasn't a let's vent and shit post all of the people who don't agree with us. And I
Mm.
know that there's parts of that that happen on that podcast. I have not had a chance to listen to it. And I don't know if I want to because if it is going to be something that's just going to make me feel, speaking of the five V's, hurt,
The five V's? What's
five
that?
V's that I talked about on Mel Robbins podcast, the five V's to happiness, right?
Oh,
If I go on there and I listen to it and it's going to make me feel invalidated, shitty, you know, like people are coming after me, then why would I don't want to listen to that.
Yeah,
So anyway, all right. So those are the two I listen to. Do you listen? You listen to some podcasts? You said
I did. I did. Hey, by the way,
yes.
I decided to try
Yes.
something different for this episode. I
Oh
am
Lord. Okay.
what? What? See, I didn't
Yes, I'm
even
moving my
tell you
microphone.
what I'm talking about, and you're just,
Okay.
you're
All right.
berating me.
I'm not.
Um,
I'm just saying. Let it all out. Let's
no,
go.
I just decided that I was going to go blind for this podcast and see if my interactions with you and my thought process change while we're recording and thinking things through. So I'm not wearing contacts or my glasses just to see if it's a different, if I get a different perspective while we're having these conversations.
Wait. What?
Yeah, if
You're blind right
I,
now? You can't
well,
see?
not blind, but I can't see details around, around me, right? So I wanted to see if it had a different effect on our conversation.
Oh my God. Okay. So what's the verdict so far, Mister? I
Nothing.
can't see.
There's no difference.
You are so. You can go blind.
So yeah,
Okay. All right.
I'm gonna
Okay.
change up some variables here and there, different episodes, to see if our conversations change. And I
Okay. Well,
find
can you put your
going
glasses on
blind
now so you
does
can see,
not.
so you don't hurt yourself
Yeah,
wherever you are?
yeah, uh,
Thank you. For
yes.
safety reasons. Jesus Christ.
Going blind does not change our discussion. I can conclude that.
Audience, you are getting a front row seat to
You know.
what I've been dealing with for years, being his friend. Front row seat.
All right, can we get on with it, please?
Yes, let's move forward. Okay, so what, what did you listen to this week?
I listened to a podcast called "Stuff You Should Know." Have you heard of this?
Unfortunately, we can talk about this one, so go on.
Why the huffing and puffing,
No, I
Robbie?
want you know what? I want you to state how you felt about it, and then I'll tell you
Okay,
my perspective.
I thought so. Basically, it's a podcast that kind of just talks about anything that might be of interest to listeners. Um, I think yeah, I found certain things were interesting. Not all of it was interesting. For example, things that kind of aligned with my thought process. I
Mhm,
enjoyed. So there was one episode about tragedy of the commons. This basically this theory that if humans are given, generally speaking, if humans are given something good, they will eventually destroy it because humans don't know how to care for things without consequences. And
mhm,
basically, it requires intervention by either separating up community, uh, that community property, or having government intervention. And I agree with that theory, which these guys didn't really agree with it, but I agree that I enjoyed listening to the discussion and the dissection of that topic. So there are certain conversations, certain episodes that I did actually um, enjoy listening to and did resonate
mhm,
with me. And I
mhm,
think it kind of they talk about things that they're different types of topics that I think people, if they're listening regularly, they will enjoy listening to one episode here and there. And yeah, I thought overall it's a pretty decent podcast.
So, I've listened to stuff you should know.
uh
I was gonna talk about it on one episode, but since we're talking about it now, let's just go there. So, I've listened to it a couple of times, and here's my take on it. I think it's a good podcast, but I think that if you listen to a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, that you need to take it with a grain of salt. Because I felt like there were a couple of things that I listened to that they were talking about, and the context and the examples that they used had a lot of missing elements on the real stuff you should know.
mhm.
And that's where I had an issue with it because I think that, and this is the thing too, and Joe Rogan talked about this on the podcast about how, on his podcast about how there's a lot of people who are out there who are clinically insane who do podcasting. And of course, because it doesn't, you can just spin up a podcast. Now, continuing and doing that's a whole nother thing, but you can just spin up a podcast and start talking. Um, However, and it's not that easy, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
However, I just felt like there were a couple of times when I listened to that show and I was like, okay, yeah, this is kind of the basics or some stuff, but there's a lot of things missing here. And I don't know if I agree with that context, or I don't know if I do that. Like me, I'm over analytical sometimes and I just go in and I like to go deeper. Um,
yeah.
and then sometimes I'm
It's
like, I don't
definitely
want to
not
go
one of
that.
those that are going deep.
No.
It's high level. It doesn't require much. It's yeah. It's high level. Just informational stuff. It's I
Yes.
thought it was it was I thought it was useful conversations, but to your point, I can see why you wouldn't enjoy the content.
I guess, the whole conversation, we've been having a lot of conversations around history and what we're going to teach and what we're going to pull out, and what we're not going to include. And things like this just kind of double down on that part. And I do think that it is important to understand historical relevance and context, no matter, what you're talking about. So some of the things that they say, it's like, okay, that's
Hmm.
true, but that's really your opinion.
Yeah,
Right? So, I just think that it's definitely not the way that the name infers that there's some historical or factual things, and while there's some facts there, it is very much still an opinion type of podcast, and that's just that's
that's a
my
good point.
opinion.
That's a good. That's a good point. That's a good point.
So, but I don't think it's bad, particularly if you're sorry guys, I'm just moving out. I'm having I'm
Yeah, you
having
got a lot of
trouble with
background. What are you doing? Are you moving boxes, or
no,
are you skiing
I've
or
got
something? What's going
some
on over there?
no, I've got some mic stability issues. My mic keeps moving around, so
At least you're not washing lettuce, so that's good.
like Greg,
Or building a fence.
like Greg. We gotta get Greg back on here and get him to do whatever he's doing, whether he's gonna be building a fence. He might be chopping down trees or
When he told us that he was washing lettuce,
that was
I
hilarious.
immediately thought of the Seinfeld episode where Kramer's washing lettuce in the shower, and I'm thinking, I just pictured Craig washing lettuce in the shower, which also was not a pleasant image. It's all this is why I've got clowns riding unicycles in my head. It's pretty
Oh
fascinating.
my god. Yeah, I feel like Greg might actually do that too. But yes, okay, we digress. But yeah, that's my only thing about the stuff you should know show. That's my that's my
Good
take on
point.
it.
Good assessment. I agree.
But if you just want to just listen to something and people just talking about random stuff, yeah,
Yeah.
just anyway. But what else? What else? Did you listen to another
It
podcast?
gets you thinking about the topics too, right? So
Yes, it does. It
definitely,
does.
like you said, you should, like you implied, you should, when you hear these things, you should go do your own investigative work on the topic. They're so you can learn the whole, all the different perspectives
Yes, for sure.
and get a
For
fuller
sure.
picture of your point. Yeah.
For sure. For sure. So, was there another one that you listened to?
No, that is the one.
That is the one. Okay. All right. All right. Listen, look, but you know what? I am so happy that you're listening to podcasts because
I've
when
come
we
a long way.
first started, remember?
I know. I know.
Oh,
I am finding these to be useful, and I'm enjoying them. So yeah, I thank you, Robbie, for putting me on this path.
of course. Of course. Okay. All right. So, let's talk about artificial intelligence and how it's
Where
affecting the real world. No, I'm saying, okay.
I had well, why don't you go first?
I really didn't know. I mean, when in our pre-preparing audience,
Well, okay, then let
Stephen
me.
mentioned that he had something that he wanted to say.
I
I
did.
want to give you the floor. I want to give
All
you the
right.
floor.
Are you ready for some?
I
So
don't know if I'm ready for this, but I'm going to try to be. So
no,
let's
this is a
just
legitimate AI discussion. Okay,
okay, okay, all right.
there is a Chinese company that makes sex dolls, and they've just started integrating AI into their sex dolls to make them more interactive and more human-like.
What?
It's incredible. Now, so there's a couple different aspects. So that basically it's going to allow better communication and interaction with the humans that are doing whatever with these dolls. um, so there'll be more context, and they'll be able to maintain conversation over a few days, the same conversation. Also, they'll be able to select from a variety of different personality types, and these are now on sale in the U.S. and Europe, and they go for like I think about $2,200, and they're planning in the future to make these dolls even more lifelike, where they will be able to have movements such as smiling or winking their eyes. Now, this whole thing just creeps me out to start with. I mean, what are we doing to society just to get money? I mean, it's destroying human beings by giving these absurd options just to make a profit. Um, but there's also the other data aspect, right? So they're integrating AI into these dolls. This data, this data is being stored in servers. So all this interactive data. What is the owner of the doll communicating with the doll? What are the responses from the doll? This is all being stored in servers. Now they're saying that
And you're
this
saying
data,
these are sex dolls. So, like
yeah,
when the person has sex with the doll, that's being stored too, right?
I would assume yes, because they're interacting. Um, and that's also kind of a privacy concern. Now they're saying that at the push of a button, that data can be erased from the servers. But how much do you trust? I'm sure there's a lot of fine print, because you know that this company will want to take that data and use it to modify the behavior in the dolls, so they can so they can understand what do the human counterparts actually respond to, and work on that to improve their dolls, right? So I'm certain they're saying that the data can be erased. Maybe maybe the people that decide not to erase it, they're just capturing the data and using that data to improve their dolls, and to maybe also to sell the data packages to other companies to make a profit, which is very common. But this whole thing, number one, we are really fucking with humanity and how we interact with other people. And number two, there's the whole privacy concern, right? So these things, I just find this all very interesting. First of all, I want to meet one person. To my knowledge, I don't know anyone that uses sex dolls, and I don't understand how that can be satisfying. Isn't that kind of like having sex with a corpse or something? I just don't understand the
I
whole
don't know.
thing.
I have no idea. I've never done that before. I have no
I
intention.
didn't say you've done that
Okay, well,
before.
you're asking me like, how
No,
does that
I
work?
thought maybe you have friends that have sex dolls. I don't know.
Well, I don't have any friends that have sex dolls, and if I do have friends that have sex dolls, they know not to tell me that.
Well,
I mean, like, that is not something that I wanna know. Oh my god.
I think if I had a friend that had a sex doll, it is something that I would want to know, because I
Of
probably
course you
would
would want to
distance
know.
myself. Well, I'd have a lot of questions for them,
Of
but I
course
I
you
don't know if
would.
I could be friends with someone that's using a sex doll. It's creepy.
It is creepy. I think the
And
word
there's something, it indicates there's a component missing from that person,
Okay,
right?
so
There's
I have a
something,
question for you.
not to be judgmental of people out there, if any of
Who
our audience is actually using a sex
using sex
doll. No
dolls? Yeah.
offense.
Yeah,
No offense.
people do what they do
Yeah.
sexually. I mean, that's fine. But my question is this to you. Why did you find this? How did you find it? What how did this
I
become
You know
something
what?
that you wanted to
I
find from an AI
I
perspective?
I have no. I just came across it. I was just reading up. I was looking on the
What were
news.
you reading up on?
I I was definitely not reading up on AI sex dolls, but somehow
I was just
I somehow came across it while I
wondering.
was reading other things.
Okay.
You click on, yeah. start clicking on things, and
Okay, so you're telling me you found
I
it in a
came
rabbit.
across this headline and an image of a sex doll, and I was like, "What? Let me read some more on this."
Okay. So you clicked on this and this company is selling them, and you said they have a subscription for the AI per month?
So for the first year, it's actually free, and then after that, they charge a subscription fee.
Wow, so they wanna get you locked in for
Yep.
a year
They
and,
want to
like,
get you addicted to
caught up
that.
yeah, caught up in a relationship, again,
Yeah.
addicted, like
Yeah.
Instagram and all these other things, and then they'll start charging you.
Yes.
This
That is
is
literally
really
what it is. It's getting them caught up and addicted to, well, caught up in a fake relationship. And this is why I don't understand. There are so many, for a fact, there are so many people out there that uh, get caught up on these online relationships, right? It's a similar thing. They're having a relationship with a machine, and they get caught up, and they can't let go. It's and then they're going to be paying subscription fees every month after the first year, and they are going to think they are with an actual person.
so
How
that
far does this go? Where
well, that's the thing. Evidently, I saw something that said that, um, the majority of people use ChatGPT for cheating on tests and all that kinda stuff, or term papers. And then the next level of things that people use ChatGPT for is exploring an intimate relationship with the bot
what do
and
you what?
sexual relationship, yes, and, like, creating, like, an online girlfriend and boyfriend and or depending on what you want. Having an online AI boyfriend and girlfriend is growing, and people are doing this on ChatGPT and other AI companion apps
But it's
where
not
people
real. What?
I know, and this is the point too of the whole, like, the guys and having to help our boys and all of these things because it's almost this is so easy. It's just like texting. Remember I told you about texting? Did I talk to you about texting? Did we talk about that last week? We talked
What
about
do you
so much
mean?
on this podcast. I don't know. Yeah, I think I did. How I was thinking about how I don't
Oh,
necessarily
yes.
want
Yeah.
to always like I'm still texting,
Yeah.
of course, but
Yeah.
I want to try to have more interactions in the real world, right?
Right. Right.
And that it's so easy to turn off and to manage when you're doing these online relationships, right? You have so much more control. In the real world, it's harder because you're dealing with a human being. And that person's controlling them and you're controlling yourself. So it's like all of this like back and forth stuff. So I think that I'm concerned about it too. I mean, I don't know why people don't want to interact with people except for fear of failure and fear of rejection, which
Mhm.
is, again, going back to that's a part of life. But it's almost like people don't want to live. There's a certain amount of people that don't want to live their life. And we are going to lose more and more boys to this because of fear of this. And then some on this thing too that you're talking about, some woman she's married and she has an online relationship, an online boyfriend with an AI, and her husband's okay with it.
Strange. Well,
It
technically, it's not
it's not
cheating.
real. Yeah. Well, I guess that's why
I mean, he
right,
doesn't have to
like
deal with his wife's emotions, and it all works out.
does it though?
No, it doesn't. I'm just joking around.
But yeah,
Um,
all of this a lot of this too was created by people who couldn't have real relationships in the real world.
I mean, I
And
think
that is the thing.
it's all about money, and they'll take it. These
There's
companies will
that
take it
part.
as low as they can.
It's so crazy though. Like I don't know. I don't
But
sex dolls
you know,
and AI. I wouldn't
they're
want my stuff. Anybody who does that, you got to know. If you got an AI, it's one thing you have a sex doll, nobody knows your business. You're doing your thing. It's a doll,
like,
right?
what is it? What
But
is
a
that sexual?
computer,
What does it feel like physically when
I
you're?
don't know.
What, is it? Does it feel? Do they make the sexual organ? Oh, yeah. Hold on. Actually, yes. They said
I'm
that
glad
the
you're answering your
genitals
own
are uh, they are made to feel soft, and somewhat authentic. Yes, I read that.
Yeah, I'm glad you answered your own question on that one
Yeah.
because I have no clue.
Yeah. I think you know what I'd like to find someone that has a sex doll and get them on as a guest here so we can really dissect this whole thing. What do you think?
I think that if you want to do that for the show, that can be what we would call a mini pod or a separate pod where
That's
Steven does the interview and Robbie does not
what? What?
participate.
Why?
That's what I think. I don't have
Why?
any interest in that conversation.
You wouldn't be fascinated by learning what's going on in the head of a guy that uses a sex doll? You don't find that fascinating? You don't have any questions for them?
I feel like any questions that I have could go sideways, and it probably would be better coming from you and better if I just listen
You're so
to the
judgmental,
episode.
Robbie. I'm so
I
disappointed.
am with stuff like that. Like I don't know how I'm responding. Here's the thing though, at least I know myself, right? At least I know that it could go sideways. Like at least I'll
What
put it out
what
there.
when you say go side,
What do I mean by that?
what
I
would you
mean like
say to
I
this
don't
person that
know.
would be so offensive?
I don't know what I would say or wouldn't say
Would you
that
say
could
something
be
like, "You
offensive
listen,
to
you
the
sick
person.
fuck"? Would you say, "Listen, you sick fuck, stop using a damn
No, I
sex
don't
doll.
talk like
You're
that.
inept,
No.
disgusting." Okay.
No, 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 I don't talk like that. I would never. First of all, that's disrespectful. I would never approach anyone like that. I don't approach people like that. That's not my MO. Um, I can be low key shady sometimes, but most people can. I just think that it's not. I don't know what question I would ask that could be offensive to that person. And
Oh,
I'm
well, that's
saying
where I
that
don't
I
care.
don't want to put myself in that situation
I see.
because
I would ask all
I
sorts
per
of potentially offensive questions
I'm sure
just out
you
of
would.
curiosity. Just
I'm
out of
sure
curiosity.
you would, and maybe we could do it as a mini pod, focus pod, etc.
Okay.
I'm fine with that. You know,
I'm gonna
I
start
don't have to
searching for someone.
I don't have to be a participant in that one because I really don't want to. It's not something I don't want to talk to someone who would do that with not it's one thing, okay, as I said, your sexual experience, etc. That's what people do in the privacy of their own homes. I don't need to know what that is. I really don't.
Well,
Because I
I
don't want you to know
wonder.
what mine are. That's my whole thing. These are personal, intimate things. And I'm not interested in that. And I'm really like even if we talked about people's intimacy, okay. Like I could be on a podcast with you with that. But I really have no interest in understanding why someone would want to have sex with a doll, with an embedded computer, with data that's being fed to servers for everything. And
I
I think that's
wonder,
crazy.
would the desire to be with a human-like artificial doll, would that desire supersede the need for sexual privacy?
That I don't know. Maybe. I guess so if it's on sale. People are
Yeah,
buying
I'm
it,
curious to
right?
see how their sales go. It'll be interesting to. I'm gonna check up on in the
I'm
future.
sure you're gonna analyze that. I would love for us not to end on this note, but if we do, that's what we do. I mean, is there any other AI thing that you're gonna talk about? Or is this
That's it. It's all about the sex dolls.
oh my God. Again, the fact that this you quote unquote, what did you say?
I stumbled
Stumbled
upon
onto this.
the article. Okay,
You stumbled upon the
I was not
article.
actively
Audience,
seeking
he
out articles about
stumbled,
AI sex dolls.
quote unquote, on the article. All right, Stephen. You wanna say goodbye first? I'm gonna let you say goodbye first, then I'll end it.
My friends, it's been another wonderful podcast to all of our listeners. Thank you for joining, and I will talk to you in a week. It is I, Stephen Kennedy, your bird, your bird certified. You're, you're
I am not
bored.
cutting that out. I'm not cutting that out.
Cut it out, Robbie. You've got to cut
No,
that. That's going to the cutting floor.
no,
It is I, Stephen Kennedy, your board certified atheist, at your service.
no. That was hilarious. So,
That's got to be cut.
audience,
That's
this
got to
is
be cut.
another week. Thank you for listening to us. Keep your data safe. And we will talk to you next episode. Have a great week.